So this is going to be a relatively technical compilation, but it does, I hope, portray the building of this story and the robustness of the data behind it. This will be presented at a technical conference on Friday, so it's kind of technically oriented, but I think it's kind of fun to go through it and see what we've done. We'll read those later. Those are good forward-looking statements. So we are on the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend, and this central part of it, which is where most of the gold endowment is, it is really formed by a collection of lower plate carbonate windows, these red things. This is the host rocks for the gold mineralization. All the gold deposits lie in this red rock. And there's a big one at Gold Acres, and then this cluster at Cortez. And the third piece of this puzzle is the lower plate window at Toiyabe. Okay, so this comprises the Crescent Valley section of the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend. And of course, we have historic gold mines on the flank of Toiyabe here, the Saddle Mine, and then the current resource in the Courtney. So we know we have some Carlin style gold endowment on this project. The big missing link is where's this gold coming from? And what's the size potential? Can we find some more? What does finding more look like? Okay, so in order to play those games, first you have to assemble the land position. You know, that's really why I joined the Westward team, was these guys were actively doing that when we first talked, and I really liked what they were doing because this is thinking like a big company. A lot of juniors have their 50 claims in Nevada. Give me some money so I can go drill some. Right? These guys now control a district scale land position. So now what? Well, now we need to do the systematic work that a major company would do. If Newmont or Barrick had this as a greenfields play in some place, what kind of tactics would they apply to it to demonstrate that this is something we need to invest in and drill and turn into a mine? What do we got to do? And then this is something that really sets Westward apart, I think, is, you know, we have some big company experience here, so we know what the big companies are looking for. Well, the idea, we know what our exit strategy is. If we're successful, this is going to a big company. So let's put it on a silver platter for them. We'll do the work that they would have done anyway. Okay, so that's what we're up to here. So that's number two. We did the systematic exploration. We've got some very interesting results, and the task in front of us now is to attract the financial horsepower to drill this thing. So here's the geology. We won't belabor this too much. It's actually very typical geology, the same geologic setup you see at Cortez, Gold Acres, the Northern Carlin Trend, really anywhere where there's lower plate carbonates exposed at surface, and we have Carlin style geology and gold mineralization. This is what it looks like. So we wanted to tear this thing apart, and the first thing we did was apply a fairly detailed gravity survey to it. And again, this is what a Newmont or a Barrick or an Agnico Eagle would do, is go out here and collect the foundational exploration data so that we can make smart, informed decisions. And we're looking for some very specific things, so we set out a very specifically designed survey. And it worked exceptionally for us, actually, in the horizontal gradient of gravity. This is a structure map. This allows us to see the deep structure in these rocks. And what we see is a big north-south trending corridor and these big northeast trending structures interacting with that. This is the structural framework of all of the big Carlin districts in Nevada. And this is new. This had never been seen at Toiyabe before, because a gravity survey like this had never been done. And until you sort of stand back and look at the bigger picture with bigger thinking geophysical surveys, it's difficult to see these big patterns. So this was a major accomplishment, is finding a big north-south trending corridor, structures intersecting with it. This is a good structural environment. Let's look at the resistivity, or sorry, the residual. So this is a map of gravity also, and it just kind of shows us in the yellow is sort of the extent of those lower plate host rocks at depth on the property. And they're a little bit shallower here and a little bit deeper here is what this map is telling us. And the reason being is this east flank has been down dropped on the hilltop corridor. This is a big down drop structure. It has Lamprey dikes in it. And these are important because this tells us the hilltop corridor is a deep seated structure that goes all the way to the mantle of the earth. And this is important, and not all faults do that. The mantle is where gold comes from. This is the source of gold. So if you haven't tapped the mantle, your gold endowment is going to be limited. So if you go to Cortez, if you go to Carlin, they've all got big faults with Lamprey dikes on them. And actually any big gold camp around the planet. These are structures interpreted from gravity.
Okay.
Okay. It's the structural array of the property. So let's go. And in addition to that, we've developed some rather nuanced modeling techniques in Nevada to look for alteration footprints in the lower plate carbonate host rocks, because we don't just want carbonate host rocks. They need to be altered. They need to be altered with Carlin style hydrothermal fluids. Otherwise, they're of no interest to us. And actually, this is what we found was an alteration footprint interpreted by the geophysicists right here in this polygon, right in the footwall of the hilltop corridor. So this is the setup to all the big Carlin camps. This is what you want to see. Let's keep going here. And the scale of this thing is not small. There's a kilometer scale bar. This alteration footprint is a few kilometers in diameter. And about a dozen years ago, actually, a previous property owner flew a helicopter-based ZTEM survey and did the interpretation of the resistivity and the magnetics. And they determined that this low resistivity feature here at depth was the place to be looking. And this is interesting because these two surveys were completely independent, and this was interpreted by two independent geophysicists. They're both telling us, here's the bullseye. I like to see things develop this way, right? There's no bias involved in the interpretation. So let's migrate this data up. We're looking at a very deep slice. Now we're looking at a shallower slice, probably a few hundred meters below the ground surface. And this anomaly persists over 1.5 kilometers of vertical extent. And it turns into something that is a high resistivity feature. And it's what we would expect to see where these systems are forming jasperlates, silicification. The top of all Carlin systems look like this. Okay, let's go one more, Rob. And in addition to that, the magnetics now, we were looking at resistivity before, the magnetics, and the geophysicists are telling us there's an intrusive body here at depth. And this is important because this is probably the plumbing system and the source of some of the intrusives you can see that the guys have mapped here in the field. So this is geophysical data, so this is hard data. These rocks have been observed in the field. This is fact, okay? So we're attempting to connect fact with geophysically imaged products. Let's keep going. So we've laid that geologic map into this slide because all of the data that we collect, we want to benchmark back to the bedrock facts. And you can see that the mappers were mapping a very interesting anticline feature here, and Steve is best at this. You know what an anticline looks like, but an anticline looks like this, where the rocks have been folded. The oil guys like to drill the tops of these things because they're fluid traps, right? Carlin fluids do exactly the same thing. They get on the top of an anticline and they're trapped. So there's an anticline sitting in here, looks like this, plunging right towards this geophysical feature. And this bolsters the setup of a Carlin system. This is what all the big camps look like. is a large anticlinal feature striking into a big crustal scale fault like the hilltop and creating a large alteration system here. Well, this is exactly what we're mapping with geophysics and geology. Geochemistry, we know we have the Carlin type system there because there's been historic mining just off our west flank under the map legend here. There's a 100,000 ounce historic pit that was actually discovered by Homestake and mined, I believe, by Inland Gold and Silver. And of course, we have the Courtney resource here on our property. So both of these indicate to us that there is some endowment of Carlin type gold here. And this is very interesting. It's a good place to start from. We don't have to prove that idea, do we? We have a system here. So let's keep going and look at the size of this system. The arsenic is a very good footprint map and shows you about the size of a hydrothermal system, because Carlin ore bodies really are arsenic deposits with a little bit of gold. Fundamentally, they're an arsenopyrite system. And arsenopyrite arsenic is easy to measure in rocks and soils, and it patterns very nicely. And it shows us where this wedge of arsenic in the soil geochemistry is also pointing right down this antiform and into this geophysical feature. Why is an arsenic footprint important? First, it tells us, yes, we have system. And secondly, we can gauge the size of it. This is a map from 1966 that was published by the US Geological Survey. It's an arsenic soil and rock footprint map. And I've put it in here at the same scale as our property map. The scale bars are the same. And this is what Cortez looked like before there was any claim staked on it. This turned into the Cortez camp. Let's hold that thought for a minute. So let's look at a section through here and try to put all this busy data together. And this is a section that looks a little bit conceptual and cartoonish, but the fact is it actually honors all of the data that you've just seen. It's built off of the fact-based geologic mapping. We've put the Z-TEM anomaly in here at 200 meters elevation, the low resistivity. We've put the high resistivity in here at 1700 meters elevation. We've incorporated the gravity alteration footprint, which is this feature here. And we have incorporated the geochemical plume, the arsenic and the gold, which is coming up, out, and channeling along this stratigraphic control. So this is what all of the data is telling us. This is the best and most simplest way to assemble the data. So to me, what we've got here is a fully preserved, large-scale Carlin type system in the Cortez Trend. It's the third piece of the puzzle in the Crescent Valley window collection. It's never been drilled. There's not a drill hole on this section. And this is what the Cortez Hills ore body looks like, again, at the same scale as this section. So people ask us, how big is this? I don't know, but it's enormous, right? The possibilities are for another pipeline or Cortez style of hydrothermal system. We think we have the third one in the camp. So the interesting thing about this is, and a thought I'll leave you with is, can you imagine being in Nevada in the late 1960s and being able to stake the Cortez district? This is what we're doing. This is the opportunity at Westward. And this is why the geologists are so excited about it. It's a pretty robust data set. It's a data-rich environment. And this thing has simply been off the radar. It's sort of been unexplorable because it was a postage stamp collection of different property owners, and nobody previously had ever put all the land together, taken a look from 30,000 feet and said, well, what the hell is going on here? Where did these historic gold pits come from? What's the system look like? What's going on here? this is what the data is telling us.
And so it's our opportunity now to put some drill holes into this, and we have a 10-hole program designed for 2025 to do just that.
And you might ask how deep we have to drill. You know, this is 500 meters between the ticks here. Within a few hundred meters, we should be into the system. You know, a 500-meter hole take us down to here. We should be well into it. But what's really attractive to me is that's only going to tickle the upper third of this thing. I mean, we have a whole world of gold targets at depth here, which are mimicked by Cortez Hills just across the valley. This is 10 Ks away. We have a direct analog. We know what we're looking for, and the geology is telling us the geology is all the same. The hydrothermal system seems to have a similar size. The big difference is Cortez Hills has 10,000 drill holes in it. This one has 0. You know, a big company that had this target would set a hole up and drill right down the throat of this and keep it going for 2 Ks.
Yeah.
That's what a big boy would do. We have to live within the capital markets we find ourselves in, and we're going to give it the best shot we can. And we're discussing internally how we approach this thing, and we're thinking 10 holes at 500 meters, but you know, maybe it turns out 5 holes at 1,000 meters. I don't know. We need to have this discussion internally, and
We need to peer review that a little bit, and understand and think, put the screws to our thinking in terms of dialing in the target and how to best allocate capital to, you know, in a phase 1 drilling program, how that's going to look and how we're going to be able to answer questions. What a springboard off what you said, Kelly, is that this system that we're showing at telescope vertically, this happens all the time in Nevada on these Carlin systems where you literally see hundreds, if not, 1,000 to 2,000 meters of vertical extent to the system. So we've got lots of analogs. Most of northern Nevada looks this way, but that vertical extent is a real key feature. And I can think of many ore bodies, and actually Cortez Hills is a great one. Cortez Hills has over a vertical kilometer of mineralization. Wow. Yeah, it's an impressive ore body. And so what Kelly's walked you through, this isn't some pie in the sky, us thinking about something, we have to think out of the box. This is based on a lot of reality from systems that we've had direct experience with in Nevada. And we're just kind of tickled pink about it because this is one that's gone off, it's been off the radar for 60 years. No one's paid any attention to it. And by doing simple systematic work, cost effectively, and then kind of putting a little bit of this and a little bit of this into it, is that we recognize the patterns here are very similar to the knowns, things that we've worked on. And it really excites us in terms of there's some tremendous opportunity here that we want to get some holes into.
The spread, so wide space holes, 500 meters spacing between drill holes, vertical, RC. We really need as many piercings into this target as we can get. And like the guy said, we're going to have internal discussions about which of these are the most valid to test those target ideas that we have. But they're all in this larger campfire oriole of alteration that we've defined through systematic exploration. And so as it stands now, that's 5,000 meters of drilling, $2 million US to complete that program, 5 acres of disturbance. And that's something that we can accomplish in 2025 as a first pass to this larger system that's going to need several years of drilling to get to the next decision phase of if it's good enough to advance. Right on. And on the left, you can see the historic drilling on the property. And the little yellow shape is the historic open pits. And we have a small resource just to the north of that. And all the previous operators focused on that small resource that's 170,000 ounces of gold. And we didn't set out to find another 100,000 ounces on top of that. We set out to find a multi-million ounce company maker. And that's what this target represents. These are the historic open pits.
Oh, okay.
Just off our property.
Okay.
And then we have a resource just north of that. That's the 170,000 ounces. And we just see that as leakage of the bigger system that's off to the east, identified by geophysics
Camp has basically been pretty dead since the early nineties when the mining was wrapped up at Saddle Mine. Not much has happened out here. Because of that fractured land position. And some other things that have happened along the way. You know, there's been a lot of reasons why Toiyabe was the little project that couldn't.
Okay, Rob, can you go to slide 5?
It didn't have any intrusive rocks on it. That was common knowledge. In fact, it's full of dike filled fault corridors. So we proved that in the last couple of years. This north-south trending corridor that we've just identified, nobody knew about that. These are fundamental geologic features that you've got to see to convince yourself this could be a quality Carlin type system. If you don't see that, it's a negative. Okay, this one isn't so good. Let's move on to the next one. We didn't know really anything about the size of this geochemical plume because nobody had ever put all that data together and plotted up the simple heat maps and interpreted this in a system scale interpretation. Because they couldn't, they had a postage stamp of ground here, they had a piece of ground here, they had a piece of ground
That's
here.
what we show on slide 5 here. So Toiyabe,
This consolidation thing is just key to the whole thing.
yeah, the upper left-hand claim block is Toiyabe, 165 claims. We started off Momentum Minerals with Turquoise Canyon, which came from Keith Newmar's first mining gold, and that was 188 claims. It was just logical to us that these two projects belong together, and the vertical line that separates these projects is where the Campfire Target sits.
The
And that was-
target is sitting right here. So nobody had complete visibility of it until we put the whole thing together.
And I think as Rob and I learned when we worked for Gold Standard Ventures, that smart land consolidation and taking something that's supposedly an asset, but is really a liability because of fractured land, consolidating land and actually turning it into a real asset. And so, until the guys spent a lot of time consolidating land, this was a really problematic land position. And now that it's consolidated, there's elbow room to think big and to explore big. And now it's not just this campfire complex, but we see the opportunity to develop additional targets along that big structure that Kelly alluded to, the hilltop corridor. There's so many positives now that come out of doing the land consolidation. So it's land consolidation sounds simple, but it's a huge value add to what we're trying to accomplish here.
And just for further context, so the mines up there in the Cortez Gold Rush, that mine in the complex there,
Right.
that was commissioned in April 2024 last year. That resource is 13 million ounces at 7 grams. And Barrick has 4 Mile. They're drilling down to 1,200 meters to hit mineralization. They're hitting 10 to 20 grams per ton down there. So that just shows you how deep these deposits and systems go. But what's beautiful at Campfire is to get to the top of the system for us is only 150 meters.
These guys are drilling 3-kilometer deep holes over here to add resource. That's the game they're playing today in the Cortez camp.
Cross section. So yeah, to get to 150 meters, that gets us through the Roberts Mountain Thrust, which is often referred to as the Carlin window, and it gets us into the Devonian Wind Band. So the Devonian Wind Band is the primary host rock, which hosts all of the large Carlin systems to the northwest, Pipeline, Cortez Hills, and as Kelly talked about, there's 10 to 20 geological reasons why this system needs to be tested.
You might speak to the other host rocks in the section, Steve.
Yeah, so something as Kelly and Andrew were just alluding to the wind band, so what's in kind of the blue right in here, so between here and here, that's the most favorable host rock within the Cortez district. But one of the added benefits of thinking big and thinking about what we know from elsewhere at Cortez and also on the Carlin trend is the next unit down, this SRM, which is the Roberts Mountains Formation, is also a really high quality host rock. So this section of Roberts right in there is another good quality host that, to the best of our knowledge, has never been tested anywhere in the greater Toiyabe Hills area. So on our property or on Barrick's property. So where those little pits are. So this unit, well, pardon me, this unit down here. That has never been drill tested, and that's a fantastic host. So again, in terms of thinking big and thinking about multiple target opportunities and thinking about an opportunity that's never been assessed with a drill hole, the Roberts Mountains is that's a great place to explore. And again, it's going to take some deep drilling to get there. But again, you know, here's the column, the vertical column of potential hosts. There's what is that? Kilometer and a half
Yeah.
of high quality host rock that is basically it's virgin ground.
Which is quite unusual to be on the cusp of a 50 to 60 million ounce gold complex, never before drilled in Nevada.
Further confidence in terms of the quality host rocks. So this package from DHC, which is Horse Canyon, Wendan, and Roberts. They have slightly different names on the Carlin Trend, but that package of host rocks from beneath the Roberts Mountains thrust down through here, that's the same package of rocks, same age rocks that you'd see on the Carlin Trend. It's the positive patterns of Toiyabe Hills are phenomenal, and the setup to the knowns in terms of taking this area, which has been vastly underexplored or non-explored, and taking this and putting it in perspective of the known deposits. We're stoked at what we see out here because it fits the knowns. Good, thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
And then the star for relocation of the target is on the bottom center. And you can see it's between 3 blocks of land.
That was just 165 claims.
Yeah.
And that's where the historical resource of 173,000 ounces at 1.2 grams sits, just a few hundred meters north of Barrick's most northern open pit. So the Toiyabe Style Mine has 3 open pits there. Heap leach operation, produced in the late 1980s, early 1990s, about 100,000 ounces at 3 grams per ton. So in conjunction with our historical resources, about 300,000 ounces of endowment there. So as Kelly said, that's a good place to start. We think that's leakage out of the Campfire Target. Pretty good starting place.
Following economic mineralization down dip is a very easy win for an explorationist. Right? You're starting from the known and just following them down into a better environment where you can expect higher grades.
You know, if you look at there's probably a better example, Carl, on the Carlin Trend in the north area, but if you look at areas around what became the Genesis Blue Star mine, there were a number of little pitlets, 5,000 to 20,000 ounce surface occurrences. Those little surface occurrences were telling you about the 25+ million endowment. And the best example is a Gold Strike. Barrick's, I mean, let's face it, Barrick got into Gold Strike and they were a podunk little mining company, and they suddenly turned all these surface little pits. There were probably 15 little pits that ran like 5,000 to 150,000 ounces, and all those little pits were sitting above or just slightly outboard of 45 million ounces in Gold Strike. And look at what Gold Strike did to Barrick. It took them from a little podunk miner up in the Abitibi or wherever they were to at one point competing with Newmont to be the world's largest gold producer. So that's the power of Carlin systems. These are company making deposits. And really, if you look back in history and you think about Newmont and Barrick's involvement on the Carlin Trend, the Carlin Trend owes Newmont and Barrick their current existence. The Carlin Trend made both of those companies the largest gold producers on the planet. That's the power of Nevada. And that's, for me, it's why I anchored a 35-year career there, is because the opportunity to find one of these things is amazing. And having been involved in a few discoveries, man, it's fun to see capital put to work and people working and cash being printed. It's pretty cool.